Hi there, Ray here, and today we are going to talk about Android and iOS, how they compare against each other, in what phones you have Android and in what phones you have the iOS, even though you probably know that. We will take a look at what things one is better than the other, and after that we will see which one you should buy and why you should buy one over the other, and after that we will take a look at which is the best overall in my opinion. And without wasting more time, let's start. And we're better to start than with the iOS, and here we have the iPhone. If by any chance you weren't sure which is which, just kidding, we all know the iPhone. And why do people buy the iPhone? Well, we all know that people buy the iPhone because everyone wants one and everyone buys the new best thing. It's like a social thing, but if you ask people, they say it's because it's more private, it's more secure, and other things like that. So we will leave the social stuff out of the way for now. Is iOS more secure? And the answer is simple, yes, but not for the stuff you might think about. The reason why iOS is more secure in my opinion is because of the software updates that the phone receives. Let's be honest here, if you don't update your antivirus, the newer viruses will be more effective. And when I say the less updates, I don't mean that Android has less updates than iOS or anything like that. I am just saying that Android phones don't get as many updates on the upcoming years. For example, a normal Android phone will get big updates for like another 3 years. It might change on what kind of phone you buy, it might be even less, so check that. And it's worth to mention Samsung, who is making changes to that, because Samsung has promised more updates for its phone in the future, but still they don't come close to iOS, because when we look at iPhone here we have 6 years of updates, and that goes for the antivirus system and other quality of life improvements. So since the iOS has more antivirus updates, you are less likely to get hacked, and more of the viruses are made to hack Android devices. That is true too. So when it comes to viruses and when it comes to your privacy, yes, iOS is more secure, but it doesn't mean that Android isn't good too. They are both great, just iOS is a little better when it comes to those things. But for iPhone to be that good, it need to make some compromises. And when I say that, I mean Apple has total control over the apps you get. They verify every app on App Store, and they don't allow in most cases you to download dangerous things, not even through the web. And here is one of the main reasons why people buy Android. It's that you can do whatever you want with the phone. It is a lot more customizable than the iPhone. You can make your phone look however you want. And since Google allows other companies to make phones with Android, that has led to companies making some really weird but sometimes good phones. And that's why Android is good. It's more fun and there is a phone for everyone. But before we go anywhere else, I want to talk about two things, and those are price, and just after that I want to talk about price to performance. And I know there are a lot of people who don't care about performance when they buy a phone, but this is a very important thing in my opinion, so if you want to know more about that, stay tuned and don't leave. So first, price. And here we know that Apple has really expensive phones. I mean, if you don't want to spend more than $800, it's not even worth looking at the phones. You won't find anything good. That is a fact that everyone knows because Apple is such a famous company. We all know a couple of things for them, but when we take a look at the Android side here, we have phones from all kind of price ranges. I mean, you can get a phone for $100, but you can go and spend even more than you would have spent on an iPhone. But you have more options, and sometimes you don't want a good phone. Maybe you are someone who doesn't really use the phone as much, and that's okay. You can just get a really cheap Android. And to be honest, cheap Android phones are really good nowadays. Sometimes people cannot tell the difference between a flagship phone and a cheap phone. They are so good now. And I know over time you will be able to tell because the cheap phones are a bit slower and their build quality isn't as good. But that is beside the point. But when it comes to cheap phones, Android phones are the way to go, there is no question. But things get a bit more interesting when we look at the flagship phones. Because when people spend more than $1,000, for example, there are more options in the Android side, but there are options at iPhone phones too. And here people buy the phones for a lot of things. First, the camera. People want the best when they spend that kind of money. And when it comes to phone cameras, you will buy the phone depending on what kind of photos you want to take with that phone. For example, when it comes to people, selfies and things like that, iPhone usually are better. But if you want to capture nature or some objects and want as much detail as possible, you might want an Android, maybe a Samsung. And that's not to say that Samsung doesn't take good selfies or the iPhone doesn't take sharp photos, because they are good and they do those things. But when you buy an expensive phone, you look at those small things. But what about when it comes to price to performance? And well, it depends on the category. If you are looking at cheap or mid-range phones, Android wins. I don't think we need to go there. But when it comes to high-end phones, they are similar and they are really different. What do I mean by that? Glad you asked. Maybe you didn't, but I will tell the reason anyway. So they are really good. They both have high performance. They both are fast. But against the iPhone, the Android phones don't stand a chance, and the worst thing is that they don't stand a chance at performance, and they are not even more efficient. They have more performance and their battery lasts longer because they don't take as much battery as the Android flagships because it's more efficient. So when it comes to cheaper phones, get an Android, but if you are getting a flagship and want more performance, you should get an iPhone. But before we close this video, there are a lot of other things to consider when buying and choosing your phone, so stay tuned. And don't leave if you want to hear more about that. So when it comes to what phone is best, you have to ask a simple question: what will I use this phone for? Because like I said, if you are someone that just answers calls, then you don't actually need a good phone. But if you are someone that uses the phone for other things, then you might want a better phone, and I said that already. But here things get interesting and things finally go towards the Android phones. What do I mean when I say that? Well, if you are someone who works on the phone and does multitasking and things like that, then an iPhone cannot compete with the Fold that Samsung has. Or if you are someone that like the best photos but you want that on a phone, then Sony has better cameras, but they require some more editing. And if you are someone that, for example, like to play a lot of games on a phone, then there are phones that are made with just gaming in mind. So what is better, Android or iPhone? Well, even though I love Android and I have used Android phones all my life, I have to accept that in almost every case the iPhone is better. But like I said, it depends on the kind of person you are. So honestly, it depends on what you want to do with your phone. But for almost all the people, iOS phones make more sense than Android phones. And with that said, this was Ray. If you like this video, it helps a lot. If you didn't like the video, subscribe, it helps more. But honestly, if you like the video, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Check if you want to see more of my previous videos, they are good, and I will catch you in the next one.